A few years ago I was working as a deckhand on an Alaskan fishing boat. From a young age my parents instilled in me a strong work ethic. They always said hard work leads to greater returns, so I naturally gravitated towards a career that shared that philosophy. Alaskan fishing added high risk to that equation, and in return, the rewards were even sweeter. I couldn't imagine doing anything else and planned on working my way up to captain one day. This story takes place during my 5th crabbing season. By then, I knew the ropes, I was familiar with the waters, and I'd witnessed a few deaths firsthand. I thought I was prepared for anything. I was dead wrong. We were a crew of 15, myself included, when the season began. That number would be halved by the time we returned to shore, and I'd be left incapable of setting foot anywhere near the ocean ever again. I was sailing on the Seaward Sarah, a vessel that was getting a little long in the tooth but was known for her reliability. Since she'd passed her safety inspection earlier that year, I had no concerns as we left port for the cold waters of the North Pacific Ocean. It was exhilarating to be on the sea again, with the fresh salty breeze and waters so vast, you couldn't see anything but blue for miles around. Spirits were high and the excitement of starting off the new journey was electric. We always hold the party on first and last night. It was tradition. Even the captain would join in and dance and sing and drink. We noticed the first sign of trouble 2 days into the journey. The Seaward Sarah was listing on her starboard side. It wasn't at a dangerous angle, but after consulting the ship's engineer, the captain determined it was safe to proceed farther into the North Pacific Ocean. He planned on bouncing her out once we started loading crabs into the cargo decks. We are overfill the port cargo and underfill the starboard. I didn't question the plan. It seemed reasonable, and besides, I was just a deckhand. The captain could piss in my mouth, tell me it was wine, and I'd smile and agree. That's the way it works at sea. I grew more concerned as the voyage went on. The list worsened over the course of the next week. It went from my barely noticeable incline to my calves burning from straining against the pull of gravity towards starboard. That's when the captain started making a lot of calls. I couldn't hear what was going on, but I could see him shouting into the receiver, his face getting redder and angrier as the days wore on. I was told he was cursing everyone from the ship manufacturer to the inspectors to the contractors who'd last done repair work on our hull. I was told it was business as usual. One evening, when most of us were gathered in the dining hall, holding our plates and glasses to keep them from sliding down the table, the captain burst in and announced we were turning round. Our reactions were mixed, with some experiencing relief and others disappointment. No one knew what this meant for our wages, or whether the repairs could be done in time to get back at sea before the end of the crab season. Me, I was one of the ones who was relieved by the news. The vast ocean I'd been yearning for months had become progressively more unsettling as the ship tilted. I became keenly aware just how far away I was from dry land, from safety. This place I found freeing suddenly felt like a cage, and I wanted out. I felt the Seaward Sarah turn as I headed back to the crew quarters and used the wall for support. The combination of the dime turn and the ship's tilt were terrible for my equilibrium. I needed to lay down and let myself adjust. I don't know what would have happened if the storm hadn't hit that later that night. Would the Seaward Sarah have limped home safely? Would she have rolled over along the way? I'll never know now, because the storm did hit, one that seemed to come out of nowhere, barely being caught by the radar before its waves and rain started pelting the ship with the fury of an angry sea god. The Seaward Sarah groaned in pain as our list worsened even more. Doors flew open, objects fell and hit me as I staggered up the hall and towards the deck. I didn't realize just how bad I had gotten until I felt my feet touch the wall, and realized the wall was becoming the floor. I was still inside when I heard the call to the abandoned ship. I was bruised, groggy, and disoriented. Enough water had gone in from somewhere that I was also soaked. I felt a pair of hands grab me by the shoulder and usher me forward when I stopped to take a breath. I know at some point I donned a life vest, but I couldn't tell you when or how I got it on. All I remember is the surreal sensation of the world changing directions inside the ship, and the sight of tall waves illuminated by lighting outside once more. Thunder drowned out the screams of my shipmates, but I could see them scrambling to launch a lifeboat. I threw myself towards them, but before I could catch a handhold, I felt a wall of ice-cold water drag me into the railing. A second wave, the reaction to its action, reached over the rail and pulled me to the water. The pain was unbearable. Not only had I been tossed around like a rag doll, but the water felt like I'd rolled into a vat of quicksand made of sharp needles. I didn't know which side was up and which was down, but thankfully, the life vest lifted me back to the turbulent surface. The water had gone into my ears, muffling the sound of the storm, and I tried to flare my arms, hoping for rescue, but I couldn't lift them. I couldn't stop treading water long enough. This hell went on for longer than I cared to reflect on. I just know wave after wave pulled me under. But the jacket always brought me back up long enough to catch my breath. When I close my eyes, even years later, I can still feel the unrelenting assault of the waves mingling with the taste of the salt on my tongue. I was going to die. I was sure of it. Either by not breathing in when I had the chance or by drowning from rainwater in my mouth whenever I screamed. And then I felt a tug. And my horror amplified tenfold as I imagined being in the jaws of a sea serpent about to pull me into the ocean depths. I thrashed desperately trying to escape, only to hear Greta's voice chastising me. "Stop that. I'm going to pull you in." Greta hoisted me onto the lifeboat, and once again, I was over the edge. I slipped the rest of my way in, landing in wet and bloody water. I could hear orders being shouted at me, but all I could do was curl up and wait, utterly useless. I know the others were preoccupied by something as they started rowing as hard as they could. In hindsight, I think they were trying to get clear of the whirlpool of the sinking ship. The storm passed almost as quickly as it arrived. The ocean wasn't as quick to calm, but the turbulence lessened to a manageable degree. When I was finally able to, I sat up and took inventory of my surroundings. I found myself in a lifeboat with 7 other crewmates. All that was left of the seaward Sarah were bubbles rising from the depths of the ocean. Miraculously, there was a second lifeboat paddling towards us, and once we connected, we were overjoyed to find that every single crew member had survived the capsizing. The captain, who was in the other raft, shouted over the water in a deep, booming voice. We sent out a distress call before she went down. Never coordinates. It won't be long. I hoped he was right because my hands were trembling from the cold and the quickly depleting adrenaline. We tied the rafts together, took stock of our supplies, food, first aid, and then waited. Now you could think that there'd be cheering when the light appeared on the horizon. That all hands would start to paddle and wave and to celebrate. Instead, there was a sudden and deathly silence as a communal swell of anxiety filtered into us. There were haunted expressions of Greta and John and Sarai and even the captain's face. The latter was holding the flare gun, but his finger was tapping nervously on the trigger. Sometimes, without knowing why, you get a bad feeling. People call it a sixth sense, but I think it's simpler than that. I think it's dangers perceived bypassed by the brain so you can act faster than you can think. Kind of like how you can actively analyze a person's body language to get more information than you'd get from hearing their words alone, but even if you're not trying to, you still subconsciously notice the little signs showing discomfort or anger or attraction. It's innate. What we think we would perceive is only scratching the surface of all the information we truly take in. The brain, our consciousness, focuses on one thing, but our survival instinct notices the other discrepancies, and when it does, it signals danger without telling you why. "It's not moving," Greta whispered. She hit the nail on the head. She connected the dots outlining the proverbial red flag. When she did, a sort of unspoken acknowledgement traveled through the group. As one by one we noticed it too. You see, there were 2 problems with the light. 1. The nearest ship to ours was at least another 5 hours away, probably longer if they hit the same store we had. 2. The light was perfectly still, staying at the same height and never once bobbing along with the ocean surge. It also wasn't sweeping the ocean as one does when searching for survivors. You see, it had appeared way too fast, only about half an hour after the storm had passed. It was extremely unlikely that an unknown ship had been in the area. We all try to keep tabs on one another because, in such turbulent waters, knowing where everyone is a question of life and death. Yes, we're all technically all competing against one another, but you'd be hard-pressed to find another seaman unwilling to drop everything to save another in a pinch. It is a code of honor we all follow, but suppose this was an unknown vessel responding to our distress call. We still had to contend with the second issue of its unnatural immobility. My stomach contorted, wondering what it meant. This light was fixed on a single point in the near distance. It was glowing. No. Pulsating. but it never once moved on any sort of axis like it should if it was searching for water. And it was immune to the push and pull of ocean waves. There's not a ship on Earth that can do that. The only reasonable explanation was it might be a Coast Guard helicopter, hovering perfectly in place and dangerously low, but then again, even if it had been deployed the second the distress call was sent, a rescue chopper couldn't have gotten to us that fast. The light was impossible. The light felt menacing. The light acted like a lure, goading us to come into it. The boom of an explosion snapped me to reality, and it was followed by a crackle up above. The captain had fired off one of the flares. It hung in the air, slowly fizzling in a downward arc. I remember feeling so scared I dug my fingers into the lifeboat. The shot was one thing, but my fear had to do with the light. I was so afraid it would come closer now that I knew for sure where we were. I was more afraid of that light than I've ever been of anything in my life, but thankfully it stayed away. "Row," the captain ordered. No one moved, not even to breathe. "Row, damn it." John reached for the paddle, but Greta grabbed him by the forearm and stopped him, shaking her head. The captain glared at us with bulging eyes. He docked in an authoritative stance, but even he wasn't able to surprise his quakes of fear. If one followed logic, he was right. We should head towards the light. And yet the longer we stared at the unwavering thing, the more it unsettled us. It's funny how something as simple as bobbing up and down could have alleviated our anxiety, but the light didn't do that. Not even once. Faced with a soft immunity, the captain grumbled and grabbed the paddle up of his own. "Fine," he hissed. "I'll go. Any man or woman too cowardly to come can transfer to the coward's raft." He gestured to us. "Anyone with balls, come with me. We need to flag that ship down before it moves on without us." The flare hit the water and spat out a few more dying embers. I was surprised to see a few crewmates get up. John and a couple others transferred over to the captain's raft. An equal number transferred to the coward's raft. With contempt on his sour, sea-worn face, the captain cut the lines between us and directed his raft towards the searchlight. Even as they rowed off, we pleaded with them not to go, but it was like they'd been infected with bravado. I could hear them chanting in a rhythm, left, right, until they were just a blimp on the horizon. 10 minutes after the voices went quiet, at the estimated time the captain's raft would have reached the light, it suddenly blinked out of existence. The captain, John, and the other 5 crewmates on that raft were never seen or heard from again. The raft has never turned up. This despite being outfitted with an emergency tracker. Planes equipped with the same tech have gone missing as well, so it could be that those trackers aren't worth much, but it still gives me nightmares to think what would have happened to me if we'd followed the captain. As for us, it took 7 hours, but eventually we were rescued by the crew of the Rose Shannon. As expected, the storm had delayed rescue attempts. They warmed us up and combed the waters where we'd last seen the captain's raft, abandoning the search only when the Coast Guard arrived and took over. That night, I had nightmares of the light growing closer and closer, and every time its glow was about to hit me, I'd feel a pressure in my head like it was about to explode, and a searing, burning pain on my skin. Then I'd wake up drenched in sweat. I now work as a trucker, a mercifully landlocked job. I drive through all kinds of creepy locations. I've seen some things on this job, but nothing has ever scared me more than the light I saw that terrible night. I don't know if it's because of the lack of closure on the captain's raft, or in my subconscious saw something that it felt my brain was better off not knowing. I don't know. I don't like to think about it, but now that I've written this, I think I can finally move on in a way. I still keep in touch with Greta. She's still working out there. Props to her for getting back on the seahorse. She now captains her own vessel. I couldn't be happier for her. But sometimes when we're catching up, she talks about that night, and she always follows it up by saying another ship's been lost in that same area. I think they're up to 5 now. No survivors. Although the final transmission on one of the ships mentioned seeing a light on the horizon. Sailors have come to avoid what they're calling the Alaska Triangle. Part of me wishes I knew conclusively what's happening out there, but I'm mostly glad I'm here on solid ground, far from light. If you live near the ocean, don't read this post. just to be safe. A friend sent me this email. I read it and made the decision to post it here. I'm sorry. I need you to post this everywhere, okay? Please, it'll make sense, I promise. My wife loves the ocean. We live by it, sort of. We live by a harbor that leads into the ocean, so we don't get to stare at nothing but water forever. My wife wanted a place by the ocean proper, but it freaked me out. I gave a lot of excuses that were plausible, you know. What about the rising ocean levels because of climate change? We'll get flooded, and we'll lose the house if there's a really bad hurricane, that kind of thing. I didn't tell her it's because I think the ocean is absolutely fucking terrifying. Because she loves me, if she wants me to be happy. She wouldn't have moved here if she knew, but I love her too. And I want to see her happy without putting me first, so I thought getting a place tucked into a harbor would be a good compromise. We moved out here, where the salt air peels the paint off our shingles and the fog sweeps in, morning and evening. I'm usually okay with the harbor. I treat it like one big lake, a big salty lake that has seals sometimes. My wife was so much happier than before, so for a while it was worth it. She likes to walk along the beach. I don't like walking along the beach, so my wife usually goes alone. We were planning to get a dog so she can go on walks with it. I usually make dinner, so she goes while I'm cooking and returns in time for when it's ready. Last night she missed dinner. She's been late a couple of times, but usually she texts me. She knows I worry. She didn't text me, so I worried. After half an hour I sucked it up and went looking for her. The fog was dense. I really got the stress that you couldn't see 5 feet in front of you. It wasn't fully dark out yet, but the gray made the visibility even worse. I brought a flashlight and had my cell phone out and kept telling myself it was way too early to call the cops. I called for her a couple times. Felicity. Adrian. Hearing my own name in her voice made me want to burst out, and I just started running towards the sound. I almost slipped on the rocks on the beach, but she caught me. I was worried. I was so worried. Why didn't you text? I admit. I should have been more composed, but I wasn't really thinking straight. It ain't my phone. I honestly wasn't sure what I expected to hear, but it's not that I thought she was joking with me, but I was very confused. What? She pointed, and through the fog I could see the shape of something. Like I mentioned, we sometimes get seals, but not walruses, which was my first thought when it was not nearly big enough to be a beach whale. Then I realized that it wasn't walrus either. Its skin was super pale, like those animals that live in caves, almost translucent. I could see thick dark veins even through the fog, but that was all about I could parse. I literally had no idea what I was looking at, which is basically what I said. The hell is that? I don't know, she said, and that's when I noticed how calm she sounded. Almost dreamlike. It was weird. She barely opened her mouth when she spoke. But I aimed my phone while I tried to take a picture of it. Then I got into an argument with it, but it's fine now. For a second I felt relieved that there were at least an explanation for why she didn't text. Before the rest of that hit me square in the what the fuck. Thinking she might have a concussion or something, I tried to stay calm. What do you mean you got into an argument? At that second a sound came from the thing, and the creepiest thing about it was how soft and sweet the sound was. It was this big, strange animal that barely moved in the fog, and it had opened its toothless mouth so wide my whole head could have fit in there. But the sound that came out of it wasn't some deep bellow, it was like a little child saying, "Ah, for the dentist." My wife turned to the thing and said, I know, I'm going to explain later." "Can you explain over there?" I tried to pull her away, but she wouldn't go. It doesn't want us to know it exists. There was a sudden squelching movement as something big and wet slapped the pavement, and the thing made a sound like a little squeak. I couldn't see it properly through the fog, but there was absolutely no way I was going to get any closer to it. I tried to whisper to her, but isn't that ship already sailed? Humans. It doesn't want humans to know it exists. It comes to shore to eat. Whenever we saw it, we tried to tell others. It began to eat those things too. It ate our drawings on bark and carvings in stone. It ate our woodcuts and inked maps. It ate our radio signals. It ate our photographs, so it ate my phone. To eat it right at the source. I decided to try and wrap my head around eating radio signals later when we were safe, so we don't tell anyone. Problem solved. No, because we'll remember, but if we die it'll make humans suspicious. Others will search for it like you searched for me. And it is full. It is so full. The thing made that humming noise and I realized I recognized what it sounded like. It sounded like my wife doing baby talk. "Honey, how do you know what it is?" "Because it ate my tongue," she said, simply and calmly. And I could see in the dim, misty light, her eyes wide with fear. It replaced it with one of its children. She opened her mouth wide, and for the first time I could see inside her mouth, and something slimy and pale was writhing in there. "You won't tell anyone, right? You won't tell anyone about it? It's the only way it would let me walk away. You'll protect me, Adrian, right? You'll protect me." I took her home. We climbed into bed. She put on a mask, I think to make her feel better. I struggled to fall asleep, obviously. I thought about it for a long time. At that beach, in that fog, I meant what I said when I promised that thing I wouldn't tell anyone about it. I thought we could figure this out. We could learn sign language so she wouldn't have to use her mouth, but for those agonizing hours when I knew she was also wide awake beside me, my wonderful, lovely Felicie, infected with a parasite on the whims of that asshole from the deep, my fear and my shock transformed into full-on, bone-deep rage until even that exhausting. I did eventually pass out. When I woke up it was noon. Our bed was damp and there were water droplets all over the floor. My wife is not in the house. I don't know when she'll be back. I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. I think she's alive, but I think she's being held hostage. As long as that thing is alive, my wife and I will be prisoners. Now, at this point you might be wondering why I'm sending you this. Maybe it'll eat the internet too. But I don't think so. She said it was already full. I think the only reason I stopped my tongue is because it was too full to eat it too. I'm calling its bluff. I know it's selfish to risk, but I am not going to let that thing get away with what it did to Felicity. I'm terrified, but I'm not going to let my fear rule me. After I send you this, I'm going to find my wife, rip that tongue out of her, and then kill that thing. But I need you to keep it distracted. So post this for me, okay? Spread the word. Overwhelm it. Wish me luck.